The roar of the crowd swept across the Carillon capital's grand boulevard like a tidal wave. Banners of crimson and gold, the sacred colors of the Carol people, fluttered in the warm breeze as the procession made its way toward the central plaza. At the center of all this pageantry, perched atop a majestic hovering platform adorned with the medals of countless victories, stood Uvar Cleon. The returning hero's imposing figure, skinned the characteristic deep blue of the Carol race, with the distinctive crystalline ridges along his forearms that marked him as a warrior of the highest caste, was instantly recognizable to everyone. Mothers lifted their children to catch a glimpse of the legendary liberator, the military commander whose tactical brilliance had led their forces to victory against the Dravthul Empire, saving countless Carol worlds from subjugation. Yet despite the adulation surrounding him, Uvar's expression remained solemn. His four eyes, the larger primary pair, focused ahead, while the smaller secondary pair scanned the crowd, betrayed nothing of the turmoil within. He acknowledged the cheers with the occasional raised hand, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying memories of a battlefield far from here, of an encounter that the jubilant citizens of Carillon knew nothing about. "Look at him, the greatest warrior our people have ever known," a voice shouted nearby. "They say he single-handedly defeated a Dravthul battlecruiser with just a scout ship," another added excitedly. "After this victory, we could expand our influence even further." "Nothing stands in our way now," a third voice proclaimed. "Certainly not those humans from that backwater system." "Humans." A younger Carol laughed. "My professor of zoology says they're barely worth studying, still struggling with primitive interplanetary travel, aren't they? I heard they're strange creatures, soft-skinned and fragile. They'd break like twigs against our warriors." Uvar's secondary eyes shifted slightly toward the conversation, but he maintained his stoic demeanor. If only they knew, he thought. If only they understood what he had witnessed. The procession eventually reached the central plaza, where the members of the High Council of Carol awaited on an elevated platform. 8 figures in elaborate ceremonial robes stood in perfect symmetry, representing the 8 sacred provinces of the Carol people. At their center, Leader Morith, the supreme political authority, stepped forward as Uvar's platform docked with the ceremonial stage. "Commander Cleon," Morith announced, his voice amplified across the plaza. "On behalf of the High Council and all Carol, we welcome home our greatest champion. Your tactical genius and unwavering courage have secured our dominance in the Outer Rim for generations to come." The crowd erupted in cheers once more. Uvar stepped forward and performed the ceremonial bow, touching his forehead crest to his wrist guards in the traditional fashion. "I merely served as the vessel for our people's strength," he responded, his deep voice carrying the practiced humility expected of a Carol warrior. As the formal welcome ceremony progressed, Uvar noticed council member Sirac watching him intently. Unlike the others, whose expressions showed nothing but admiration, Sirac's gaze held calculation. The head of the Military Expansion Committee was known for his hawkish policies and ambition. Their eyes locked briefly, and Uvar felt a chill despite the warm day. After the public ceremony concluded, an aide approached Uvar as he was escorted toward the Warriors' Hall for the private celebration. "Commander," the aide said quietly, "the High Council requests your presence for a private briefing tomorrow at first light. They wish to discuss certain aspects of your final campaign that were not included in your official reports." Uvar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of tension among the Carol. "I will be there," he responded, his voice betraying nothing of the dread that statement had ignited within him. That night, as celebrations continued across the capital, Uvar stood alone on the balcony of his ancestral home, looking up at the stars. He recalled the final days of the campaign against the Dravthul, when his flagship had ventured beyond the established front lines, pursuing a retreating enemy vessel. What they had encountered there, what he had witnessed, could change everything for the Carol. His chief strategist, Telera, joined him on the balcony, her slender form silhouetted against the lights of the celebrating city below. "You haven't joined the festivities," she observed. "The entire planet celebrates your triumph. Yet here you stand alone. Some victories come with burdens that celebration cannot lighten, Yuvar replied. Telera studied him carefully. They had served together for 2 decades, and she knew him better than most. The council summons you tomorrow, she said. They want to know about the humans, don't they? Yuvar's secondary eyes widened slightly, the Carol equivalent of surprise. How did you? I was there too, remember? I saw what those ships did, how they intervened, how they protected that colony world when they had no obligation to do so. Telera stepped closer. The question is, what will you tell the council? Yuvar turned to face the city once more. The truth, at least, as much of it as they're prepared to hear. And if they're not prepared for any of it, Telera pressed. Then the Carol may soon face something far worse than the Dravthul, Yuvar replied grimly. Ignorance has never been a shield, only a blindfold. The council chamber was an imposing circular room, its high ceiling adorned with historical murals depicting the rise of the Carol civilization from a single world to a dominant power controlling 17 star systems. The 8 council members sat in elevated positions around the chamber, with Leader Morith at the symbolic zenith position. Yuvar stood at the center of the chamber, a position typically reserved for petitioners and subordinates. The message was clear, despite his heroic status. Here he answered to the council. Commander Cleon, Morith began, your campaign against the Dravthul Empire has been nothing short of miraculous. 17 victories without a single strategic defeat. The complete collapse of their military structure in the Outer Rim. These accomplishments will be taught in our war academies for generations. Thank you, leader. Yuvar responded with appropriate deference. However, council member Sirac interjected, leaning forward in his seat. There are discrepancies in your final reports, particularly regarding the battle at Vega Outpost. Yuvar had anticipated this. Vega Outpost, where everything had changed. The official record states that the Dravthul retreated after suffering critical damage to their command ships, Sirac continued. Yet our intelligence suggests there was a third party involved in that confrontation. Ships of unknown design and capability. The chamber fell silent as all eyes focused on Yuvar. Your intelligence is correct, Yuvar confirmed, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. During the final phase of the Vega confrontation, a small fleet of vessels entered the system. They identified themselves as a defensive unit from Earth, representing the human species. A murmur swept through the chamber. Leader Morith raised a hand for silence. Humans, the bipedal species from a Sol system. Morith asked, his tone disbelieving. They barely maintain a presence beyond their home planet and a few meager colonies. That appears to be a carefully cultivated misconception, Yuvar replied. The vessels I encountered demonstrated technology far beyond what our intelligence suggests they should possess. Their ships moved with precision that rivaled our most advanced units, and their communication systems easily penetrated Dravthul encryption, something our specialists have struggled with for years. Impossible, scoffed Counselor Denar, the eldest member. Our scientific surveys of their system show primitive fission technology and rudimentary space travel capabilities. They couldn't possibly. They have been hiding their true capabilities, Yuvar interrupted, breaking protocol. What we have observed have been carefully staged demonstrations, allowing us to see only what they wished us to see. Sirac's eyes narrowed. And how exactly did these supposedly primitive humans interfere in our conflict with the Dravthul? Yuvar activated his personal data projector, and a 3-dimensional tactical display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed the positions of Carol forces in blue, Dravthul in red, and a new element, small green icons representing human vessels. The Dravthul had established a hidden supply base on the 4th moon of Vega 6, which we had not detected, Yuvar explained, manipulating the display to zoom in on the area. The human vessels did not engage either side directly. Instead, they deployed what appeared to be autonomous probe units that emitted targeted electromagnetic pulses, disabling Dravthul guidance systems. So they helped us? Leader Morith asked, clearly confused. No, Uvar replied firmly. They were protecting a small research outpost they had established on the second planet of the Vega system, one neither we nor the Dravthel knew existed. When our battle spilled into their operational area, they intervened to contain the conflict and protect their assets. The chamber erupted with voices, council members talking over each other in shock and disbelief. Leader Morth again called for silence. You're suggesting these humans have been operating covertly within territory we consider under Carol influence? Morth's voice had hardened. Yes, and not just in Vega. Uvar manipulated the display again, showing a sector map. Small green indicators appeared at various points, all locations where Uvar had found evidence of human activity. They have been observing us, studying both Carol and Dravthel military tactics for what I estimate to be at least 15 standard cycles. Why wasn't this included in your official reports? Serac demanded, his voice rising with indignation. Because I needed to verify my findings before potentially causing a diplomatic incident, Uvar replied. And there's more that you need to understand. He changed the display once more, showing recordings from his ship sensors during an encounter near the Vega system's outer boundary. The footage showed a barren planetoid, unremarkable except for what appear to be geometric patterns etched into its surface. This is the remnant of what was once a small moon in the outer Vega system, Uvar explained. The humans used it as a weapons testing ground. Based on the residual energy signatures and structural damage, they have developed energy projection technology that exceeds our most advanced theoretical models. The council members stared in stunned silence at the images. There's more, Uvar continued, his voice growing grimmer. During our pursuit of the retreating Dravthel forces, a squadron of my ships encountered what we initially believed to be a navigational anomaly. Their guidance systems failed, communications went dark, and they were led directly into an asteroid field. He paused. I lost 37 warriors before I could recall the squadron. A tragic navigational error, Counselor Denar suggested. It was not an error, Uvar stated flatly. After recovering the wreckage, our analysis showed evidence of external interference with our ship systems, a form of information warfare we had never encountered before. The humans call it cyber warfare, the ability to remotely access and manipulate enemy systems without physical contact. The implications of this revelation seemed to ripple through the chamber like a shock wave. If what Uvar was claiming was true, the humans possessed the ability to compromise Carol battle systems without firing a single conventional weapon. This is absurd, Serac finally declared, rising to his feet. Commander Cleon is either grossly mistaken or has been somehow compromised. Perhaps the strain of extended combat has affected his judgment. The idea that a peripheral species like humans could possess technology that rivals or exceeds our own is not just unlikely, it's preposterous. Several council members nodded in agreement, clearly preferring Serac's explanation to the unsettling alternative Uvar presented. I have brought evidence, Uvar insisted, producing a secured data crystal from his uniform. This contains all sensor logs, communications intercepts, and analysis from our encounters with human technology. I invite our top scientists to examine it. Leader Morth gestured, and an aide stepped forward to take the crystal. We will review this information carefully, Morth assured him. Until then, I must ask you to refrain from sharing these theories with anyone outside this chamber. If there is any truth to what you claim, we must approach this situation with utmost caution. As the session concluded, Uvar noticed Serac engaged in intense conversation with two other council members. From their expressions and gestures, it was clear they were not convinced by his testimony. Worse, he caught fragments of their conversation, phrases like containment strategy and preemptive measures. Telera was waiting for him outside the chamber. Well, she asked quietly as they walked together down the grand corridor. They don't believe me, Uvar replied. Or they don't want to believe me. Serac is already pushing for aggressive action. Then we don't have much time, Telera said. The surveillance probe we left in the Vega system transmitted new data last night. The humans are expanding their presence there. if Serac convinces the Council to take hostile action. The consequences would be devastating. Yuvar finished. We need to make them understand what we're dealing with. 3 days later, Yuvar was summoned back to the council chamber. This time, the atmosphere was markedly different. The council members appeared tense, and Leader Morith's usual diplomatic demeanor had hardened into something more resolute. Commander, Morith began without preamble. Our specialists have analyzed your data crystal. While some of the readings are unusual, they believe most can be explained by natural phenomena or Dravthal countermeasures that you misinterpreted. Yuvar felt a cold anger rise within him, but maintained his composure. With respect, Leader, your specialists weren't there. I was. Nevertheless, Morith continued, the Council has reached a decision. We will send a delegation to the Sol System, the home of these humans, to assess their true capabilities and intentions. Given your familiarity with the situation, you will lead this delegation. Yuvar's primary eyes widened in surprise, but his secondary pair caught Serac's subtle smile. Something wasn't right. The delegation will include diplomatic representatives, Morith explained, but also a contingent of military advisors under Counselor Serac's authority. This will be classified as a standard diplomatic mission following the conclusion of hostilities in a neighboring region. Now Yuvar understood. This wasn't about verification. It was about reconnaissance before potential conflict. Serac had convinced enough council members that if humans did possess advanced technology, the Carol should move quickly to neutralize any threat they might pose. I'm honored by the assignment, Yuvar replied formally, knowing that refusing would only result in someone less cautious taking his place. When do we depart? 2 standard cycles from today, Morith answered. The diplomatic corps is already preparing the necessary protocols. As the meeting adjourned, Serac approached Yuvar directly, his tall frame looming. Commander Cleon, he said, his voice silky with false camaraderie. I look forward to our journey together. Perhaps seeing these humans up close will help you recalibrate your assessment of their capabilities. Perhaps it will help us all understand the true situation, Yuvar replied neutrally. Serac leaned closer. The Carol did not become the dominant force in this sector by allowing potential rivals to develop unchecked. If these humans are as advanced as you claim, then it's even more critical that we understand exactly what we're facing and how best to ensure our continued supremacy. The threat beneath his words was unmistakable. Serac didn't just disbelieve Yuvar's warnings. He saw the humans as a resource to be exploited or an obstacle to be removed. As Yuvar left the council tower, Telera fell into step beside him, having waited in the antechamber. They've authorized a mission to Sol, Yuvar informed her quietly. I'm deleted, with Serac and his people involved. A reconnaissance mission, Telera deduced. Preparing the way for military action. Precisely. And I've been placed in charge to legitimize it. Telera's expression darkened. What will you do? Yuvar looked up at the twin moons of Carolon, visible even in the daytime sky. Try to prevent a catastrophe. Serac doesn't understand what he's walking into. None of them do. The Carol diplomatic vessel Bright Ascendancy was the pride of their interstellar fleet, a massive ship designed to showcase Carol technological superiority while serving as a mobile embassy. Its sleek, crystalline architecture reflected the aesthetic preferences of the Carol, with soaring internal spaces and precisely angled surfaces that caught and reflected light in mesmerizing patterns. For this mission, however, the Bright Ascendancy wasn't traveling alone. 2 heavy cruisers, the Guardian of Dawn and the Eternal Vigilance, accompanied it, ostensibly as honor guards but equipped for full combat operations. Serac had insisted on their inclusion, calling them a necessary precaution. Yuvar stood on the main observation deck, watching as the ship's crew prepared for the final jump that would take them into the Sol System. After 2 weeks of travel through established war corridors, they had reached the outer boundary of what the Carol recognized as human territory. Though, as Yuvar had discovered, human influence extended far beyond these official borders. Commander, Telera approached, holding a data pad. I've completed the analysis of the diplomatic protocols the humans transmitted. They're unexpected. How so? Yuvar asked, taking the pad from her. They're incredibly detailed regarding procedural matters, approach vectors, communication frequencies, quarantine procedures, but remarkably sparse on substantive diplomatic issues. It's as if they're more concerned with how we arrive than what we discuss once we're there. Yuvar scrolled through the document, noting the precision with which the humans had specified their requirements. Every aspect of the Carol ship's approach was defined down to the exact energy output levels their engines should maintain. They're being cautious, he observed, establishing boundaries from the outset. There's something else, Talera added. I've been monitoring communications between Sirac's military advisors. They've been conducting detailed scans of the approach corridor, focusing on detection capabilities. I believe they're mapping defensive systems. Yuvar wasn't surprised. Keep watching them. If they attempt anything that could be interpreted as hostile, I know. We can't let them provoke a conflict. The ship's announcement system chimed, and the captain's voice echoed through the chamber. All personnel, prepare for final transit. We will enter the Sol system in 15 minutes. As the countdown proceeded, Yuvar felt an increasing sense of tension. Everything he had learned about, the humans suggested they would not respond well to any show of Carol military might. Yet here they were, approaching with what amounted to a battle group. The transit itself was remarkably smooth, a testament to the precision of both Carol technology and the navigational coordinates provided by the humans. As the disorientation of warp travel faded, the main view screen activated, showing their entry point, just beyond the orbit of the gas giant the humans called Saturn. The sight that greeted them, however, was not what anyone had expected. Multiple contacts, reported the sensor officer, her voice betraying surprise. I count 37 vessels of various configurations, arranged in a hemispherical formation ahead of us. The view screen adjusted, revealing the human welcoming committee, a fleet of ships that varied from small, agile-looking craft to massive vessels that rivaled the bright ascendancy in size. They maintained perfect position, neither advancing nor retreating, but clearly positioned to respond to any threat. Beside Yuvar, one of Sirac's military advisors inhaled sharply. Our intelligence indicated nothing of this scale, he muttered. These ships weren't in any of our surveys. Because they didn't want us to see them, Yuvar replied, feeling a mixture of vindication and dread. His warnings had been accurate, perhaps even understated. A communication alert sounded, and the captain nodded to the communications officer. A moment later, a human face appeared on the secondary screen. A female with dark skin and close-cropped hair, wearing what appeared to be a formal military uniform adorned with rank insignia that the Carol translation systems couldn't immediately identify. Carol Diplomatic Vessel Bright Ascendancy. This is Admiral Helena Chun of the Earth Defense Fleet. On behalf of the United Earth Government, I welcome you to the Sol system. Yuvar stepped forward, taking position before the transmission sensor. Admiral Chun, I am Commander Yuvar Cleon, appointed representative of the High Council of Carol. We come in peace to establish formal diplomatic relations between our peoples. The human admiral's expression remained professionally neutral. We acknowledge your peaceful intentions, Commander. However, I must note that your approach formation exceeds the parameters outlined in our diplomatic protocols. The presence of military vessels of this class was not part of our agreement. Before Yuvar could respond, Sirac moved into the transmission field beside him. I'm Counselor Sirac of the High Council. The vessels accompanying us are standard honor guards for a diplomatic mission of this importance. Surely you understand the need for appropriate ceremony. Admiral Chen's gaze shifted to Sirac, her expression cooling further. Counselor, in the Sol system, we define appropriate ceremony by mutual agreement, not unilateral action. Nevertheless, in the interest of moving forward, we will escort your delegation to the diplomatic station at Titan. Your military vessels will remain at their help but admire. The delegation that would travel to the Titan diplomatic station had been carefully selected. Yuvar and Talera, 3 senior diplomats from the Carol Foreign Ministry, and, unfortunately, Sirac along with 2 of his advisors. Yuvar had wanted to exclude the counselor, but lacked the authority to do so directly. As they boarded the human shuttle, Yuvar noticed immediately that no human pilot was visible. The interior was comfortably appointed but minimalist, with seating that had clearly been adapted to accommodate Carol physiology. "Welcome aboard," came a pleasant voice from hidden speakers. "I am Arya, automated responsive intelligence assistant. I will be coordinating your journey to Titan Diplomatic Station. Please secure yourselves in the designated seating. Our journey will take approximately 73 minutes." Serac leaned close to Yuvar as they took their seats. "An unmanned vessel? They don't even honor us with a proper escort. Or they don't need a crew to operate their shuttles," Yuvar countered quietly. "Consider the implications of that technological level." The shuttle detached smoothly from the bright ascendancy and accelerated towards Saturn's largest moon. Through the viewing ports, the Carol delegation could see their escort, four sleek human vessels that maintained perfect formation around the shuttle, moving with a synchronization that suggested either exceptional piloting or, more likely, automated systems of remarkable sophistication. As they approached Titan, its hazy atmosphere came into clearer view, along with something else, a massive structure in synchronous orbit above the moon's surface. The Titan Diplomatic Station was unlike anything in Carol architecture, a series of interconnected rings that rotated at different speeds and angles, creating what appeared to be artificial gravity through centrifugal force rather than the gravitic generators the Carol used. The station was completed 3 years ago, Arya informed them, apparently sensing their interest. "It serves as our primary facility for interactions with non-Earth species, with environments that can be adjusted to accommodate various atmospheric and gravitational requirements." "You've had contact with other species?" one of the diplomats asked, surprised. "That information is classified," Arya responded pleasantly. "Ambassador Brooks will address any questions regarding Earth's diplomatic relations during your meeting." The shuttle docked with the outermost ring of the station, connecting to an airlock that cycled to match the atmospheric conditions aboard the Carol shuttle. When the inner door finally opened, they were greeted by a delegation of humans in formal attire. 5 individuals of varying skin tones and physical characteristics, but all bearing the same insignia on their clothing. At their center stood a woman of medium height with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that instantly struck Yuvar as calculating and perceptive. "Commander Cleon, Counselor Serac, distinguished representatives of the Carol," she said, her voice carrying natural authority. "I am Ambassador Elaine Brooks, representative of the United Earth Government. Welcome to Titan Diplomatic Station." Yuvar performed the traditional Carol greeting, touching his forehead crest to his wrist guards. "Ambassador Brooks, we are honored by your welcome. The High Council of Carol extends its greetings and its hope for productive dialogue between our peoples." Ambassador Brooks nodded in acknowledgement, then gestured toward the corridor behind her. "If you'll follow me, we've prepared a reception area where we can speak more comfortably." As they walked through the station's corridors, Yuvar noticed subtle security measures everywhere, scanning devices integrated into the architecture, personnel positioned at key junctions, and what appeared to be concealed weapons systems in the ceiling panels. The humans were taking no chances with their visitors. The reception area turned out to be a spacious chamber with a panoramic view of Saturn's rings. A large table of polished material that resembled wood but couldn't possibly be, given the rarity of such organic resources, dominated the center of the room. Around it were seats designed to accommodate Carol physiology. Once they were all seated, Ambassador Brooks opened the formal proceedings. "Before we begin official diplomatic exchanges, I want to address the matter of our previous indirect encounters. Commander Cleon, I believe you witnessed human forces during your conflict with the Dravthal Empire near the Vega system." Yuvar was surprised by her directness. "That is correct, Ambassador. Your forces intervened when the conflict approached your outpost. An outpost that, according to your government's official star charts, shouldn't exist," Brooks added with a slight smile. "Let me be plain, Commander. Earth has maintained a policy of strategic obscurity for the past 30 years, allowing more expansionist powers like the Carol and Dravthal to underestimate our capabilities while we developed our technology and established our presence among the stars. Serac leaned forward. If that is true, why reveal yourselves now? Why not continue this? Deception? Because circumstances have changed, Brooks replied simply. The Dravthal collapse has created a power vacuum in the outer rim. History teaches us that such vacuums lead to expansion and, eventually, conflict. We prefer to establish diplomatic channels before misunderstandings escalated. A wise approach, Yuvar acknowledged. But I must ask about the technology we encountered in the Vega system. The capabilities demonstrated there far exceed what conventional intelligence suggested humans possessed. Ambassador Brooks exchanged glances with her colleagues before responding. Commander, humanity learned long ago that survival sometimes depends on keeping one's full capabilities private. The technologies you witnessed, particularly our information warfare systems, represent only a fraction of Earth's defensive capabilities. Information warfare, one of Serac's advisors interjected. You mean the ability to remotely compromise enemy systems? Among other things, Brooks confirmed, Earth has focused its development on what we call asymmetric capabilities, specialized technologies that allow a numerically inferior force to counter larger, conventional military threats. Yuvar noticed Serac's expression darkening. This was precisely what he had warned the Council about. Humans had developed in directions the Carol hadn't anticipated, creating weapons and defenses that could potentially neutralize traditional Carol military advantages. Ambassador, Yuvar said carefully, my government is interested in establishing peaceful relations with Earth. However, there are those among us who view any advanced civilization as a potential competitor or threat, Brooks suggested, her gaze shifting momentarily to Serac. Some would use that term, Yuvar acknowledged. Then let me be absolutely clear, Brooks said, her voice taking on a steely quality. Earth has never initiated conflict with another spacefaring species. We have no territorial ambitions beyond our current sphere of influence. However, she paused meaningfully. We will defend ourselves with absolute commitment if threatened. The full extent of our defensive capabilities has never been deployed in actual conflict, and we prefer to keep it that way. The implication hung in the air. Humans weren't making threats, but they were drawing clear boundaries. Perhaps, Serac suggested with forced diplomacy, we could benefit from a more detailed understanding of your technological capabilities. As a gesture of transparency between potential allies, several human aides exchanged glances that Yuvar read as somewhere between amusement and disbelief. Counselor, Ambassador Brooks replied smoothly, diplomatic relations typically begin with cultural exchanges and trade agreements, not military technology transfers. We would be happy to discuss scientific collaboration in non-military fields as our relationship develops. The diplomatic dance continued for several hours, with the humans politely but firmly deflecting Serac's increasingly transparent attempts to gather intelligence on their military capabilities. Meanwhile, Yuvar and the legitimate diplomats made more progress discussing potential trade routes, cultural exchanges, and the establishment of formal communication channels between Earth and Carolon. As the initial meeting concluded, Ambassador Brooks invited the delegation to rest in quarters prepared for them. Tomorrow, we've arranged for a tour of some of our public facilities on the station, followed by continued discussions. I hope you find your accommodations comfortable. Yuvar noticed that the accommodations were in a section of the station isolated from critical systems and personnel, another subtle security measure. The humans were courteous but cautious hosts. Once they were alone in the Carol section of the station, Serac wasted no time expressing his frustration. They reveal nothing of value, only platitudes and evasions. They're being prudent, Yuvar countered. We arrived with warships, Counselor. Hardly the basis for immediate trust. Trust is irrelevant, Serac dismissed. What matters is understanding their capabilities and weaknesses. My sources on the Bright Ascendancy inform me that our sensors have been unable to penetrate key sections of this station. The humans are using some form of advanced shielding technology. All the more reason to proceed diplomatically, argued one of the senior diplomats. If their defensive technologies are this sophisticated, imagine what their offensive capabilities might be. Serac paced the common area, his agitation visible in the rapid blinking of his secondary eyes. We cannot return to the Council with vague assurances and tourism videos. We need concrete intelligence. What are you suggesting? Telera asked, her tone carefully neutral despite her internal alarm. I brought specialists on this mission, Serac replied. Tech experts who can help us gather the information we need, with or without human cooperation. Yuvar stepped directly into Serac's path, forcing the counselor to stop. You are proposing espionage during a diplomatic mission? That violates every protocol we operate under. It serves the security interests of the Carol, Serac insisted. The council will understand the necessity. And if you're caught? Yuvar demanded. Have you considered what these humans might do if they discover Carol agents attempting to breach their security systems? Serac waved dismissively. Their security is designed for species they've encountered before. Our methods will be unfamiliar to them. You're making assumptions about an adversary you don't understand, Yuvar warned. The exact mistake I caution the council against. The decision is made, Commander, Serac said coldly. My team will proceed tonight during the station's night cycle. You need not involve yourself. After Serac departed, Telera approached Yuvar. He's going to provoke an incident, she said quietly. Worse than that, Yuvar replied. He may give the humans justification to consider us hostile. What will you do? Yuvar's 4 eyes focused on the door through which Serac had left. I need to speak with Ambassador Brooks, he decided. Not to betray Serac's plans directly. That would be treason against the council. But to warn her that certain elements of our delegation may not share our stated diplomatic aims. That's dangerous ground, Telera cautioned. Serac has allies on the council. If he reports that you undermined him, if Serac's actions lead to conflict with humans, what happens to my reputation will be the least of our concerns, Yuvar replied grimly. Finding a way to communicate privately with the ambassador proved challenging. The Carol delegation's movements were subtly restricted, with human guides always nearby, ostensibly for assistance, but clearly also for security. Eventually, Yuvar requested a private meeting with Ambassador Brooks to discuss sensitive cultural matters, a diplomatic code for communications not meant for broader audiences. To his surprise, the request was granted almost immediately. A human aide escorted him to a small conference room where Ambassador Brooks waited alone, the typical entourage of advisors and security personnel conspicuously absent. Commander Cleon, she greeted him, gesturing to a seat. I anticipated we might have a private conversation at some point. You did. Yuvar took the offered seat, studying the human diplomat's unreadable expression. In my experience, military leaders often have perspectives that differ from their political counterparts, Brooks replied, especially those who have seen actual combat rather than merely strategizing from comfortable chambers. Yuvar considered his words carefully. Ambassador, I'm concerned that there are differing interpretations of this mission's purpose within our delegation. Counselor Serac views this as intelligence gathering rather than diplomacy, Brooks stated flatly. That much has been obvious from the beginning. Yuvar's secondary eyes widened slightly. You seem remarkably well informed about our internal dynamics. Understanding the factions within potential allies or adversaries is fundamental to diplomacy, Commander. She leaned forward slightly. Just as I understand that you've been trying to convince your council that humans are not to be underestimated, often at personal political cost. This revelation startled Yuvar. How could you possibly know about my reports to the council? Brooks smiled thinly. Those information warfare capabilities I mentioned, they're not solely for battlefield applications. The implication was clear. Human intelligence operations had penetrated Carol communications to some degree. Yuvar felt a chill at the thought of how much they might know. Then you're already aware that Serac may attempt to gather information through unofficial means, Yuvar said carefully. We are, Brooks confirmed. Security measures are in place. Ambassador, I must emphasize that Sirac's actions do not represent the official position of the Carroll government or this diplomatic mission. Brooks studied him for a moment. Why are you telling me this, Commander? Warning a potential adversary about your own side's operations could be considered treason in many cultures, including, I suspect, your own. Because I've seen what humans are capable of, Yuvar replied honestly. If Sirac provokes you, the response could lead to conflict. A conflict that would benefit neither of our peoples. And you believe avoiding conflict is more important than absolute loyalty to your council? I believe in the survival and prosperity of the Carroll, Yuvar stated firmly. Sometimes that requires recognizing when aggression serves neither. Ambassador Brooks nodded slowly. A perspective we share, Commander. She paused, seeming to make a decision. Since we're speaking candidly, perhaps it's time for greater transparency on our part as well. She touched a control panel on her wrist, and the lighting in the room changed subtly. We've just entered a secure communication mode. Nothing discussed from this point will be recorded or monitored. Yuvar's curiosity was piqued. What is it you wish to share, Ambassador? The real reason we've maintained our policy of strategic obscurity, she said. It wasn't just about developing without interference. Earth has been aware of both the Carroll and the Dravthul for over 50 years. We've observed your conflicts, your expansion patterns, your treatment of less developed species. You've been studying us, Yuvar realized. As we have dozens of other spacefaring civilizations, Brooks confirmed. Earth's policy has been to remain neutral and unaligned until we fully understood the complex dynamics of galactic politics. And now, the balance of power is shifting. The Dravthul collapse leaves the Carroll as the dominant force in this sector. History suggests that unchecked dominance often leads to further expansion. You fear we would eventually target Earth, Yuvar surmised. Let's say we prefer to establish dialogue while we still have leverage, Brooks replied diplomatically. These defensive capabilities you've mentioned, they're meant to deter Carroll aggression? Among others, Brooks acknowledged. Commander, humanity has focused its development on what we call asymmetric advantages, technologies that allow us to defend ourselves against numerically or conventionally superior forces. Like this information warfare, Yuvar nodded. The ability to compromise enemy systems remotely. That's just one aspect, Brooks said. We've developed technologies that can render traditional weapons inoperable within certain ranges. Systems that can disrupt FTL travel. Defense grids that can identify and neutralize threats before they manifest. Yuvar absorbed this information grimly. If true, these capabilities would indeed make humans a formidable opponent despite their relatively small territorial presence. Why tell me this now, he asked. Because I believe you understand something Counselor Sirac does not. That peace comes through mutual respect and recognition of boundaries, not dominance. Brooks leaned forward. And because you should know what will happen if his operatives attempt to breach our secure systems. The implied threat was clear, but Yuvar recognized it was also a warning meant to prevent conflict rather than provoke it. Understand, he said simply, though I'm not sure I can stop him. You don't need to, Brooks replied. Just ensure that when the inevitable occurs, you're positioned to help manage the diplomatic fallout. As the station's lighting cycle dimmed to simulate night, Yuvar found himself unable to rest. Sirac's operatives would be making their move soon, attempting to penetrate human security systems they fundamentally misunderstood. Ambassador Brooks had all but confirmed that countermeasures were in place. Countermeasures that would likely expose the Carroll espionage attempt in the most embarrassing way possible. Tellera entered his quarters after a discreet knock. It's happening, she said without preamble. Sirac's specialists left their quarters 20 minutes ago. How many? 3. They're carrying what appear to be custom interface devices, not standard Carroll technology. Yuvar frowned. He came prepared. Those must be designed to bypass conventional security protocols. Should we try to stop them? Tellera asked. Before Yuvar could answer, the station's lighting suddenly shifted to a deep red, and a calm voice echoed through the speaker system. Security alert. Unauthorized access attempt detected. All personnel, remain in your current locations. Security protocols engaged. Too late, Yuvar muttered. Within moments, their door chimed, and a human security officer's voice came through the communication panel. Commander Cleon, your presence is requested in conference room Alpha immediately. When Yuvar arrived at the designated room, he found a tense tableau. Ambassador Brooks stood with several security officers, her expression severe. Seated at the conference table, looking simultaneously defiant and shaken, were Sirac's 3 operatives. Of Sirac himself there was no sign. Commander, Brooks acknowledged his arrival coldly. Perhaps you can explain why members of your delegation were attempting to access restricted security systems in the middle of our station's night cycle. Yuvar chose his words carefully. Ambassador, I can only offer my sincere apologies for this breach of diplomatic protocol. These individuals do not represent the official position of the Carol government. Yet they carry credentials identifying them as official members of your diplomatic party, Brooks countered. A regrettable misrepresentation that will be addressed, Yuvar assured her. One of the detained, Carol, a specialist in communication systems, spoke up defiantly. We were merely trying to establish a secure connection to our vessel. The humans misunderstood our intentions. A human security officer stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed the Carol operative clearly attempting to access a restricted terminal. Your interface device was specifically designed to bypass our security protocols, the officer stated flatly. Its purpose could not be misunderstood. Ambassador Brooks turned to Yuvar. Commander, this incident threatens to end our diplomatic exchange before it truly begins. However, given your own unofficial communication earlier, I'm inclined to believe this action may not represent the broader intentions of your government. Yuvar recognized the lifeline she was offering. It is not, Ambassador. I am authorized to speak for the High Council on matters of diplomacy, and I assure you this espionage attempt contradicts our official position. The door opened, and Counselor Sirac entered, his posture rigid with contained fury. What is the meaning of this? Why have members of our delegation been detained? Your operatives were caught attempting unauthorized access to secure systems, Brooks informed him coolly. An act that on Earth would be considered espionage and grounds for immediate diplomatic expulsion. Sirac's secondary eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of agitation. This is absurd. My staff were merely configuring communication equipment. Counselor, Yuvar interrupted, the humans have visual evidence of the intrusion attempt. Further denial serves no purpose. Sirac glared at him. Commander Cleon, you forget your place. I am a member of the High Council, and I am the designated leader of this diplomatic mission, Yuvar reminded him, standing taller. An attempted breach of security during first contact with another spacefaring civilization is a critical diplomatic incident that I must address immediately. Ambassador Brooks observed this internal conflict with careful attention before intervening. Gentlemen, while you resolve your chain of command, the fact remains that we have documented evidence of espionage. Under normal circumstances, this would trigger immediate expulsion of your entire delegation. That would be an overreaction, Sirac protested. Would it? Brooks asked mildly. Let me show you exactly what your operatives triggered. She gestured, and a different holographic display activated, showing a spherical representation of the diplomatic station. Red markers appeared at various points throughout the structure. When your specialists attempted to access our systems, they triggered what we call a containment protocol. Currently, every critical system on this station has been isolated and secured. More importantly, she manipulated the display to show the space around the station. Defense platforms have automatically activated around the station. The display showed what appeared to be previously hidden installations emerging from concealed positions around Titan's orbit, their weapons systems clearly oriented toward the waiting Carol vessels. Those platforms could disable your ship's propulsion and weapons systems without destroying them, Brooks explained matter-of-factly. A precautionary measure designed to prevent escalation while protecting our people. The revelation sent a wave of shocked murmurs through the Carol present. The humans had concealed significant military assets around what was supposedly a diplomatic installation. "This is an outrage," Serac sputtered. "You lured us here under diplomatic pretenses while surrounding us with weapons." "We invited you here in good faith," Brooks corrected him. "The defensive measures activated automatically in response to your espionage attempt. Had you respected diplomatic norms, you would never have known they existed." Yuvar stepped forward. "Ambassador Brooks, on behalf of the Carroll delegation, I formally apologize for this breach of protocol. The individuals responsible will be confined to our quarters for the remainder of the mission and will face discipline upon our return." He fixed Serac with a hard stare, "Including any officials who authorized their actions." Serac's face darkened with rage. "I dare to prevent a diplomatic catastrophe." Yuvar cut him off. "One that could lead to military confrontation based on a fundamental misunderstanding of human capabilities and resolve." Ambassador Brooks observed this exchange with interest before addressing both Carroll leaders. "Gentlemen, perhaps this incident, regrettable as it is, offers an opportunity for greater clarity. Counselor Serac, you sought information about Earth's defensive capabilities. Commander Cleon attempted to warn you that we are not the primitive civilization your intelligence suggested. She manipulated the holographic display again, expanding it to show the entire Saturn system. Dozens of previously undetected installations became visible: monitoring stations, defense platforms, and what appeared to be rapid response vessels in hidden docks throughout the rings. This is merely the outer defensive perimeter of a single system," Brooks explained. "Earth has developed along different lines than the Carroll or Dravthal. While you focused on territorial expansion and conventional military power, we invested in defensive technologies, information systems, and what we call distributed resilience, the ability to withstand and respond to aggression without centralized vulnerability." Serac stared at the display, his previous confidence visibly shaken. "You've been concealing all this." "Strategic obscurity," Brooks corrected. "We have neither the numbers nor the territorial ambitions of the Carroll. What we do have is the absolute determination to defend what is ours." Yuvar studied the display carefully. If what it showed was accurate, and after his experiences in the Vega system, he had little reason to doubt it. The humans possessed defensive capabilities that would make any conventional military action against them prohibitively costly. "Ambassador," he said finally, "where does this leave our diplomatic mission?" Brooks deactivated the display. "That depends on what message you take back to your council. Earth desires peaceful coexistence and potentially mutually beneficial trade. We have no interest in Carroll territory or resources. All we require is respect for our sovereignty and recognition of our defensive boundaries." "And if the council interprets this as a threat," Serac challenged, though with notably less conviction than before, "then they would be misunderstanding our position," Brooks replied evenly. "This isn't a threat, Counselor, it's clarity. Earth will defend itself if attacked, but has no aggressive intentions toward the Carroll or any other civilization." The meeting concluded with a tense agreement. The espionage attempt would not result in immediate expulsion, but the offending specialists would be confined to the Carroll quarters for the remainder of the visit. Diplomatic discussions would continue with the legitimate members of the delegation, while Serac would be permitted to observe but not lead negotiations. As they returned to their quarters, Serac pulled Yuvar aside, his voice low and threatening. "This isn't over, Commander. When we return to Carillon, the Council will hear how you undermined our intelligence gathering and sided with aliens against your own people." "What the Council will hear," Yuvar replied calmly, "is that your reckless actions nearly triggered a conflict with a civilization whose defensive capabilities exceed our intelligence assessments by orders of magnitude. They will hear that you compromised a diplomatic mission out of arrogance and ignorance." "You admire these humans," Serac accused, his tone making it sound like a grave insult. "I respect any adversary with the capacity to destroy us," Yuvar corrected him. "Something you would understand if you'd ever faced actual combat rather than merely ordering others into it." The following days saw a remarkable shift in the diplomatic proceedings. With Serac effectively sidelined, Genuine progress emerged in discussions of trade routes, scientific exchange, and even limited cultural interaction. Throughout it all, Yuvar noted how the humans maintained a careful balance, open and generous in non-military matters, firmly bounded in anything touching security or defense technology. On the final day of their visit, Ambassador Brooks invited Yuvar for a private tour of a section of the station previously off-limits to the Carroll delegation. As they walked through research laboratories and cultural exhibits, she explained how Earth had developed in isolation before gradually expanding its presence. Your people spread across star systems because your homeworld could no longer sustain your population, she observed. Ours was driven by curiosity and the desire to ensure humanity couldn't be extinguished by a single catastrophe. Distributed resilience. Yuvar recalled her earlier term. Exactly. We have colonies throughout Sol and beyond, each largely self-sufficient, each capable of defending itself. She led him to a viewing platform overlooking an engineering bay where technicians worked on what appeared to be propulsion systems unlike any Yuvar had seen before. What you witnessed in the Vega system, the defense grid that neutralized Dravthal guidance systems, was an early generation technology. Our current systems are considerably more advanced. Why show me this? Yuvar asked. Because you understand. Something fundamental that Serac and others like him do not, Brooks replied. That strength doesn't always manifest as aggression, and that recognizing another's power can prevent unnecessary conflict. She turned to face him directly. When you return to your council, some will advocate for confrontation based on wounded pride or fear. You need to help them understand what that would mean. You want me to carry your warning, Yuvar surmised. I want you to carry the truth, Brooks corrected. Earth doesn't seek conflict with the Carroll or anyone else. But we will not be subjugated, exploited, or restricted in our development. As their delegation prepared to depart the following day, Yuvar found himself reflecting on all he had learned. The humans were not simply another spacefaring species to be cataloged, potentially allied with, or eventually absorbed into the expanding Carroll influence. They represented something different, a civilization that had developed along unique lines, emphasizing defensive capability and technological innovation over territorial expansion. The journey back to Carillon was marked by tension between Yuvar's contingent and Serac's diminished, but still influential group. The counselor had retreated into sullen silence, occasionally conferring with his remaining advisors, but largely avoiding direct interaction with Yuvar or the legitimate diplomats. Upon their return, as expected, the High Council convened immediately to hear their report. The Grand Chamber was filled to capacity, with military leaders, provincial representatives, and even cultural authorities in attendance, a sign of how significant this first official contact with humans was considered. Leader Morith opened the proceedings with formal gravity. Commander Cleon, Counselor Serac, you have returned from humanity's domain. The Council awaits your assessment of this species and their intentions toward the Carroll. Before Yuvar could respond, Serac rose to his feet. Leader, esteemed council members, I must report that our mission was compromised from the outset. The humans demonstrated hostile intent by surrounding our diplomatic vessels with concealed weapons platforms. Furthermore, Commander Cleon repeatedly undermined our efforts to gather critical intelligence about their true capabilities. Murmurs of concern rippled through the chamber. Morith's expression darkened. These are serious allegations, Counselor. Commander Cleon, how do you respond? Yuvar stood, feeling the weight of the moment. What he said next would shape Carroll policy toward humans for generations to come. Leader Morith, Honored Council, I must correct several mischaracterizations in Counselor Serac's statement. The human defensive measures activated only after Serac's operatives attempted unauthorized access to secure systems, an act of espionage during what was meant to be a diplomatic mission. Serac sputtered in outrage, but Morith raised a hand for silence. Continue, Commander. The truth about humans is both simpler and more complex than our intelligence suggested, Yuvar continued. They're not the primitive, expanding civilization our reports described. Rather, they have developed along different technological paths, focusing on defensive capabilities, information systems, and distributed power rather than territorial conquest. He activated a data projection, showing the records he had compiled of human technological demonstrations. Their defensive systems can neutralize our weapons and propulsion at ranges exceeding our own offensive capabilities. Their information warfare technologies can compromise our guidance and navigation systems without direct engagement. You speak as though you admire these creatures. Another council member interjected skeptically. I respect their capabilities, Yuvar corrected firmly. As any warrior should respect an adversary with the power to destroy them. And make no mistake, humans possess that power. Yet they occupy only a single star system, Counselor Dinar objected. How could they possibly threaten the Carol Dominion with our 17 systems and countless battle fleets? Because territory and fleet numbers are not the only measures of strength, Yuvar explained patiently. The humans have developed technologies specifically designed to counter conventional military advantages. They do not need to match our numbers when they can disable our ships before they come within firing range. He displayed the sensor logs from the Vega incident, showing how human countermeasures had neutralized Dravfell systems without direct combat. This is not theory or speculation. I witnessed their capabilities firsthand. The chamber fell silent as the council absorbed this information. Finally, Leader Morith spoke again. What are the humans' intentions toward us? Do they seek alliance? Neutrality? Do they pose a threat? They seek recognition and respect for their sovereignty, Yuvar answered. Honestly, they have no territorial ambitions regarding Carol space and are open to trade and cultural exchange. However, he paused meaningfully. They will respond with overwhelming force to any aggression or attempt to restrict their development. So they threaten us with destruction if we don't accept their terms, Serac interjected bitterly. No, Counselor Ubar countered. They offer peace and cooperation if we respect their independence. The distinction is critical. For hours, the debate continued, with Serac and his allies pushing for a hardline approach, arguing that showing deference to humans would diminish Carol standing among other spacefaring powers. Yuvar and the legitimate diplomats advocated for peaceful engagement, emphasizing the potential benefits of trade and knowledge exchange while highlighting the catastrophic consequences of conflict. As the session approached its conclusion, Yuvar played his final card, the complete sensor logs from the human diplomatic station, showing the full extent of their defensive grid around Saturn alone. This represents the outer defensive perimeter of a single planet in their system, he explained as the council stared at the display in stunned silence. Their homeworld, Earth, is protected by defenses orders of magnitude more sophisticated. If this is accurate, Morith said slowly, a military confrontation would be disastrous. Yuvar finished for him. We would suffer catastrophic losses for little or no gain. The humans do not seek our territory or resources. They merely wish to develop without interference. The council chambers emptied as members departed to consider their positions. The formal vote on Carol policy toward humans would come the following day. Yuvar found himself alone in the antechamber, mentally exhausted from the hours of debate. Telera joined him, her expression grave. Serac's allies are working the council members, suggesting you've been compromised, possibly even influenced by human information warfare. Not surprising, Yuvar sighed. His pride won't allow him to acknowledge the reality of our situation. The military leadership seems divided, Telera continued. Some see the strategic logic in your position, while others view any restraint as weakness. And what do you think will happen? Yuvar asked her. I think tomorrow's vote will be close, she admitted. But there's something else you could do, something that might sway those still undecided. When the council reconvened the following day, Leader Morith announced that before the vote, Commander Cleon had requested permission to make a final statement regarding humans. Permission was granted, and Yuvar stepped to the center of the chamber. Honored council members, he began, yesterday we debated policy based on reports and sensor logs. Today, I wish to speak not as a commander or diplomat, but as a warrior who has witnessed humanity's capabilities firsthand. He proceeded to tell the story of the Vega encounter in vivid, personal detail, describing the precision with which human systems had neutralized Dravthal technology, the apparent ease with which they had defended their outpost, and most importantly, the restraint they had shown in not expanding the conflict. "We have built our civilization on conquest and expansion," Yuvar concluded. "It has served us well, making the Carol a dominant force in this sector. But in humans, we face something different, a species that developed in isolation, focusing not on territorial growth, but on defensive resilience. They did not want our worlds or resources. They simply refused to be conquered or controlled." He looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of each council member in turn. Before today, no one feared humans. They were dismissed as primitive, their system deemed unimportant. I stand before you to tell you this perception is dangerously wrong. Humans possess technologies that render our conventional military advantages irrelevant. They can disable our vessels without destroying them, compromise our systems from vast distances, and defend their territory with an efficiency that would make direct assault suicidal. A heavy silence fell over the chamber as his words sank in. "This is not a plea for cowardice," Yuvar continued, his voice strengthening. "It is a warrior's assessment of battlefield reality. The Carol can choose peace with humans, establishing mutually beneficial relations while each civilization continues its own development. Or we can provoke a conflict that would devastate our forces while gaining us nothing." He bowed deeply to the council. "The choice before you is not between dominance and submission, but between wisdom and folly. Choose wisely." When the council's vote came, it was decisive. The Carol would establish formal diplomatic relations with humans, recognizing their sovereignty and territorial claims while pursuing trade agreements and cultural exchange. Military action was explicitly rejected as contrary to Carol interests. Serac and his allies found themselves suddenly isolated, their influence diminished by the failed espionage attempt and the overwhelming evidence Yuvar had presented. In the cycles that followed, as diplomatic channels with Earth formalized and the first trade agreements were negotiated, Yuvar found himself increasingly in demand as the foremost Carol expert on human culture and capabilities. 1 year after the historic first contact, Yuvar published his account of the encounter under the title that would become famous throughout Carol space and beyond. No one feared humans until this alien war hero told his story. The manuscript detailed not only the technological capabilities he had witnessed, but also his personal journey from viewing humans as potential conquests to recognizing them as equals deserving of respect. The book became required reading at the Carol War Academy, with military strategists studying the humans' approach to defense and security. Trade between the two civilizations flourished, with humans providing innovative information systems while the Carol shared their advanced propulsion technology. Most importantly, Yuvar's testimony established a foundation of mutual respect that prevented the kind of tragic misunderstandings that had historically led to interspecies conflict in the galaxy. Other spacefaring civilizations, noting the Carol's unexpected deference to humans, began reassessing their own intelligence on the species from the Sol system. On the 5th anniversary of First Contact, Yuvar returned to the Titan diplomatic station as the official Carol ambassador to Earth. Ambassador Brooks, now Earth's Minister of Interstellar Relations, greeted him with a knowing smile. "Your book has made quite an impression," she remarked as they walked through gardens designed to accommodate both human and Carol aesthetic preferences. "It's been translated into 27 Earth languages. Its purpose was to educate my people," Yuvar replied modestly, "to help them understand that strength manifests in many forms." "And now no one underestimates humans," Brooks observed. "No one who has read it," Yuvar agreed. "Fear is not the foundation I would have chosen for respect, but it serves when nothing else will." "Fear eventually fades," Brooks said thoughtfully. "Understanding remains. Your story didn't just make people fear humans, Ambassador Cleon. It made them understand us." Yuvar considered this as they looked out at the magnificent rings of Saturn. "Perhaps that is the better legacy. Not that I made the galaxy fear humans, but that I helped them understand why cooperation, not conquest, was the path forward. Either way, Brooks said with a smile, it makes for a compelling story. Throughout the galaxy, species that once might have viewed Earth as an easy target or inconsequential player now approached with caution and diplomatic courtesy. The phrase, "remember the Carol lesson," became shorthand in multiple civilizations for the danger of underestimating seemingly minor powers. And on thousands of worlds, curious beings of all forms would find themselves drawn to the story that began. No one feared humans until this alien war hero told his story.